411 Live.
Where you can learn about issues that affect us every day. State of world, 411 Live.
Real people, real talk.
Made to help people in our community in every way. For your girl, 411 Live.
My mother got her second Moderna vaccine, and so did my husband as a first responder. I did not, because I do not fall in any of the categories for eligibility. But I did get COVID. Fortunately, it was a mild case, and I came through it okay. So, my question, have you gotten your vaccine? Will you? Hello, everyone. I'm Beverly Taylor, and this is the 411 Live. Real people, real talk. There are a lot of questions about the vaccine, right? And some unknowns. So I have a special guest joining me to help me weave through all of the issues dealing with the COVID vaccine, and that is Dr. Kevin Izard. He is the president of the Cream City Medical Society in Milwaukee. And Dr. Izard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show, Beverly.
Absolutely. All right. So how about you? Have you gotten your vaccine?
I did. And I'm going to tell you, like a lot of your listeners, I was skeptical at first.
Mm-hmm.
If you asked me, back, when they announced Operation Warp Speed back in May, it was mid-May, I was very skeptical because I thought that it was very politicized. And, if you asked me, well, would the government put out a vaccine just for the sake of having one? And I was, at that time, I thought, yeah, they would. And probably they would. But since that time, it has become less politicized. And part of that is because of the administration change. Some of that is because I think Anthony Fauci kind of went more out on a limb to try to make sure that he was sticking with facts and not spin, and took a lot of heat from the administration for that. But I felt that he was, as best he could, was being straightforward. I think the CDC and the FDA got a lot of pressure from the medical community to make sure that they were being straight. And because not only was this vaccine at risk, but all vaccines are at risk. There are a lot of people out there who don't trust vaccines, anti-vaxxers. And if we mess this up, it's going to affect any other vaccine. So if people stop getting COVID vaccine, they might not get their childhood vaccinations and things like that. So there's a lot of pressure. And so when the time came, I looked at the risks and benefits. I decided that being African-American male, overweight, mild high blood pressure, my risk of having a complication outweighed the risk of taking the vaccine. The vaccine, as far as we can tell, has been pretty clean. As far as side effects, there are people that have allergic reactions, but that's to any vaccine or actually any medication. You can have an allergic reaction. So given all those things, I decided that it was kind of a no-brainer that it was worth getting a vaccine. Plus, there was also the idea that I'm in healthcare, and that someone's going to have to take the chance with this thing. It's a new vaccine. We don't know all the risks and side effects, so someone's going to have to be the guinea pigs. And as a physician, I should be willing to take that chance. And so I went ahead and got vaccinated. In fact, Thursday was my 2 weeks out. So I'm actually now officially vaccinated.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, when my husband got it, he had a painful muscle aches in his lower back. And then I heard from another friend who was saying that she had muscle pains in her butt. Have you heard of this muscle pain thing?
I have heard this muscle pain thing. And the interesting thing is that it may not necessarily be where you got the injection.
Right.
So you get, the injection in the arm and have pain elsewhere. It's a very unusual, vaccine. Like I said, it's new. And we can kind of get into, it's called the mRNA vaccination. So messenger RNA. Messenger RNA is, without getting too technical, all of your cells have DNA. As human beings, we have DNA.
Mm-hmm.
This virus has a variation of that called RNA. So our strands, we have double-stranded DNA. The virus has a single strand of RNA. So normally when a virus hijacks your cellular machinery to start making virus, it incorporates its RNA or its DNA into yours, and it tells your cell to start making viral parts instead of making your own body parts.
Oh.
Well, in this case, what they did was they took that little message part that goes from the DNA that goes out to the cell to start making the proteins.
Mm-hmm.
It actually took that little message and it injects that message into you. And so it does so that it was different than the way it's been done in the past is the vaccine never goes into your DNA. Okay, so it's just making the RNA that's making the proteins.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're making what's called a spike protein, which is a protein on the outside of the COVID vaccine. The COVID virus. And so I know I got too much technical. I tried to get too technical with this, but the bottom line is making this little message of a code for spike protein.
Mm-hmm.
It's not making the whole virus. So because it's not making the whole virus, you can't get infected from it. You can't get an entire virus from it because there's not enough RNA there to even make a whole virus.
Gotcha.
So all you're making is a spike part of the virus, and that spike part is what your immune system sees later on and fights against.
Gotcha. You did well. You explained
okay,
it.
I tried to.
As a layman,
Okay.
I got it. Let's jump into the effectiveness issue. Okay, so I have some questions. After
Mhm.
that first shot, are you immune from COVID?
Yes and no. And that's just something that is interesting you brought that up because this is something that's come up within the last week about the efficacy. There's two vaccines out there right now that are approved by emergency use authorization. Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. Okay, they're both mRNAs like we just talked about. Everyone was shocked when they came out with initial data that it was somewhere like 95, 96% effective, both of them.
Right.
And we were expecting to be, I think people would have been happy it was over 50. So everyone was shocked to see that it was so high. But when they did the studies, they actually did two shots. They did, the one shot, and then with the Moderna vaccine, it was another vaccination 28 days later. With the Pfizer vaccine, it was another shot 21 days later. So 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later. So that's how the studies were done.
Mm-hmm.
What they went back and looked at the Moderna vaccine, and they said, oh, well, people have 85% effectiveness after the first vaccination. They get all the way up to 95% with the second vaccination. Why don't we only do one vaccination and that way we can give twice as many people the vaccine? Okay, because and instead of getting up to 95%, we'll only get to 85%.
Okay.
Yeah, but you would get more people. Now the problem with that is that it wasn't studied that way. So we don't know how long that 85% is going to last. Right now even now, we know that the vaccine is good for at least 3 months. Okay, it hasn't been around that long, so we don't know what's going to happen 6 months, a year out, because it hasn't been around even that long. So right now, you're only guaranteed of 3 months of immunity, at least 3 months.
And that's the other thing. That's the other thing to bring up, 3 months, because people are walking around or were walking around, if they haven't heard this yet, walking around thinking, okay, I got my shots. I'm good. Take the mask off. Forget the social distancing. I'm good. And we're talking 3 months.
Yeah, I know. That's something that, hopefully by coming on the show, I hope we can get the word out, because I think people need to understand what they're doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not in any way to dissuade people or say that it's not worth getting the vaccine. But if you do get it, you should understand. I don't want people going around thinking, "Oh, I got the vaccine, I'm good for life," because that's probably not going to be the case. Especially now that we're getting these mutant viruses, what we call variants. What we're getting right now, a year from now, may be a different virus. In some ways, and it's not a totally different virus, but there are going to be different the spike protein is going to be a little different. And because of that, your immune system is going to react to it not as effectively as it is now.
Right. I'm going to come back to the variants, but I want to, after that second shot, how long does it take for that vaccine to become fully effective?
Yeah. So it's actually 2 weeks after your second shot. Okay. So again, with the Pfizer, you get your booster at 21 days, and then 2 weeks after that, you're considered to have full immunity. For the Moderna, it's 4 weeks after that first shot, you get the booster, and then 2 weeks after that.
Okay. I was mentioning that people, they've done it. They've gotten the 14 days from the second shot, and it's mask off. Let's go. But you really shouldn't do that either, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the other thing. Because I completely understand where people are coming from with this. I said my 14 days out was Thursday. So Friday morning, I go to work, and what do? I put my mask on, I do my distancing. I'm like, what's changed? And the reason why, this is the reason why that's the case, because again, this being a new vaccine, we can't prove that people aren't spreading virus, even though, when the studies were done, what they did was they took 200 some thousand people, they vaccinated them, and they looked for how many of those people got COVID. Okay. They didn't test all those people to see how many of them were asymptomatic. They didn't test all those people to see how many were spreading virus. All they went was how many people had symptomatic COVID symptoms. Okay. It's COVID disease. So we don't know how many of those people actually, may have got a mild case that had no symptoms. And so that wouldn't have come up when they followed up with them. That wouldn't have come up as a failure because they never tested them in that way.
Oh, wow.
So, so we don't really know with this vaccine that people aren't spreading virus. So, until we get more people, until they do those specific studies looking at that, we have to assume that, well, there's a chance that you could be spreading virus. And so you should continue to wear your mask, even though we do know that from the studies that you're not going to get sick. Okay, there's at least a 95% chance you're not going to get sick, but we don't know if you might get an asymptomatic case and still spread it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So with these different COVID variants that you were talking about, are we expecting too much from these vaccines?
I think the gold standard what everybody was looking for is this herd immunity. Okay, let me explain what herd immunity is. It's really a misnomer. It's really not herd immunity. It's more like herd resistance. And so the idea is that if you get enough people immunized against illness, in this case COVID-19, if someone does get sick, there's no one that they can come in contact with to spread the virus because the other people have been either immunized or they've had it already and they're immune to it. So the virus can't spread because there are very few people in your community who actually are susceptible to it. So that's been the goal. Now there's been a lot of back and forth now about whether we're going to be able to get to herd immunity or whether even there, because some people are arguing, well, the cases have started to come down, since November, and that may indicate that we have herd immunity. Although when they do antibody studies, it appears that we're only about 10% of people have antibodies. So probably not, because herd immunity you'd expect would occur at about, it varies anywhere from like 60 to 80% of people have to either be vaccinated or have the illness to have immunity, to have that herd immunity. So
we're a long way from that.
Yeah, we're a long way from that. Now, interesting also, if you look at Sweden took a different approach to this whole pandemic. Sweden said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to take all of our most susceptible people, so our elderly people that that are high risk, we're going to sequester them away, and everybody else go ahead and get infected. And we should get enough people that will get herd immunity because everybody will get sick and they'll become immune. Well, that was a nice thought, but what they found retrospectively now is that the death rate from COVID in Sweden is actually 10 times higher than its neighboring countries. And so
Oh,
that
wow.
idea really didn't work out, So it was a nice thought. In most cases, it's rare that you find anybody getting to true herd immunity without vaccines. Herd immunity really came about as a result of pushing vaccines. So an example would be polio.
Hmm.
Polio is actually a good example. Polio is almost eradicated. So if you can vaccinate enough people, then like in the U.S., for the most part, if someone gets polio, it would be extremely unlikely for that virus to spread to somebody else because most people have been immunized against polio as a child or later. So they're not susceptible. So you don't see polio outbreaks like you did, 60 years ago.
Right.
And so the idea is that if we get enough people immunized against COVID, then hopefully if someone does come up with a case, they can't spread to anybody else because all the people around them are immunized or they're immune to it. So that's the idea.
It's a nice thought.
The idea. It is a nice thought.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, part of the problem I'm not sure we're going to get there is one, this virus is a little different. For instance, when you get your polio vaccine, you're basically immune for life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really do, you do get, some initial, you get some booster shots, but for the most part, once you're immunized, it's good for life. With COVID, especially being a new and I say COVID, what I'm really referring to is really the technically it's the name for the infection. Okay, it's the coronavirus disease, COVID. Okay, so really when I'm talking about COVID, I'm talking about the virus that causes COVID, which is the SARS-CoV virus. But anyway, so the virus that causes COVID, by it being new, most people do not have any immunity to it. So everybody who comes in contact with it initially, it's going to be susceptible, And so you're starting off from ground zero, first of all, with trying to get this herd immunity. And the other problem, though, is that it's mutating already.
Right.
And so even if you had the virus, if you were infected with it back last spring, let's say you got infected last March or April or over the summer, there's a good chance that you're not immune to it now. So your immunity has either fallen off or we have these new variants that are coming out that you might not necessarily be immune to. So again, it's not a one and done.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
We're going to come back. We're going to talk about reinfection. When we come back, stay with us.
COVID-19 has changed how we spend weekends with the girls. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to brunching instead of late-night munching. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe? Should I wait?
It's okay to have questions. Now get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Because the fight isn't over yet.
You will see me choose to protect my community by wearing a face cover.
And even with my face covered,
You will see me
As a son,
as a man with a never quit attitude.
As a fighter for change.
join me in wearing a face cover.
To help stop the spread of the coronavirus.
Because this is one small act of kindness
that has the power to make a big difference.
Welcome back to the 411 Live. I'm talking with Dr. Kevin Izard, and we're talking about the coronavirus vaccine. And a couple questions popped up. Because we were talking about the Pfizer and the Moderna, that first dose, you're like 85% or something immune. And then with the second one, it's jumps up to 90 something percent.
Mhm.
What if you have had the COVID infection
Mhm.
and then you get one shot? Because
Right.
isn't having the, after you have COVID, you have some immunity?
Right. That's a good question. And And I completely understand where you're coming from in that, because really, what we're doing for the people that have not had the infection, we're giving them a shot, and we're giving them a booster a month later or 3 weeks later. You could argue if someone's had COVID before, they should already have some immunity, and really that first shot is like a booster,
Yeah.
right? So the only issue with that is that it hasn't been studied that way. So who 6 months from now they might say, oh, well, if you had COVID before, you only need one shot. They might end up coming to that point, but right now, they're saying stick with the plan because that's what's been approved, and we still don't know enough yet to deviate from the plan yet.
Right. So it is possible maybe to get coronavirus even if you've been vaccinated?
Yeah, I mean, so if you think about it, basically, again, if we have 95% efficacy, that's like 5% of people can get it again. That's 1 in 20. So yeah, we're gonna have people that that do get it. It's going to be hard to detect because people aren't going to think that they have COVID. The other thing we know too is that once you've been vaccinated, that if you do get it, you tend to get one of these asymptomatic mild cases. So that can be kind of troubling too, because in one way it's kind of good for you, but it's bad in the sense that you don't know if you're spreading it because you might not have any symptoms.
Right, right. Do you think we'll ever get to the point where it's all clear?
I've been thinking a lot about this, especially after I got my second vaccination and been clear. I think that my personal suspicion is this. I think this is going to become the new flu. I think most people are going to have at some point this year will either have gotten vaccinated or will have gotten COVID. And after that, I think next year, if they get exposed again, they're going to get a milder case. Okay. And it's going to be flu-like symptoms. But my suspicion is that this thing, because of the way it's mutating already, and because of the way that the immune system seems to be responding, where the antibody levels drop after 3 months, my suspicion is that we'll be getting a booster every year. So it'll be a lot like the flu.
Yeah.
And I think it's here for good. That's my suspicion.
But because it drops and they say, 3 months, okay, we know you're really immune.
Yeah.
Would we possibly need 2 shots in a year?
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I've said to myself already, I said, well, after we get through everybody in the first round, they may be saying, okay, it's time to get another booster. So it could very well be 6 months later, you might be getting another booster.
Wow.
But a lot of it also depends on, again, these variants, because some of them, in particular, the South African variant, one of the vaccines, the new, well, it really hasn't been released yet in the U.S., but the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It basically doesn't work against that, that South African variant. So it could very well be that depending on which vaccine you get, it may not be effective even, 6 months later or a year later because the strain has changed.
Well, I've heard that about that vaccine not working. And I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
have they pivoted and started using a different vaccine? And if they have, which one?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for what they can see, the other 3 vaccines, and I'm saying a third one, which is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, they seem to work against it, not as well as the original COVID-19 virus, but it seems that to be effective again. So it's like, I think with the Johnson & Johnson, I think it dropped from 85% efficacy down to 66% when they did the test in South Africa. Overall, 65% of efficacy.
Right.
So now that we have there's an asterisk by, when we say 95% effective for these first 2, well, when they did those studies, there was no South African variant. There was no UK variant. So they don't know even if it's still really 95%. It may only be 80-some% effective now against those variants, but they didn't do the studies against those because they weren't around yet.
Gotcha. How about the rollout for the vaccine? Have you been disappointed or, because it seems like the rollout was kind of slow in some of those underserved communities where deaths were higher and severity from the virus
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah,
that
that was
that's been
what
corrected?
I think they're trying to. Yes, I was very frustrated. In fact, for myself, I had a hard time getting the vaccine. If the problem is this, the way this whole thing was set up was the CDC made recommendations about who to prioritize. So they came up with this 1A, 1B, 1C categories. When they released it to the states, what they said was, these are recommendations, these are guidances, but you don't have to follow this. So each state was on their own to say, okay, we're going to follow this or we're going to do something different. And each state has been doing it differently. And so some states were more efficient in getting it out than other states. Wisconsin, we got off to a slow start. We've been catching up. In fact, we've been actually doing very well in the last couple of weeks. But when you look at the number of people that have gotten that second vaccine, we're still way behind, in other states. I think at one time we were like 45 out of 50 states for the new for people getting the first time vaccination or the first dose.
Right.
So yeah, but we've been again kind of just on the other end now with since then, and so we're catching up. And of course, as you probably are well aware, we passed the 1 million vaccination mark just last week. So we're getting the vaccine out there. The problem though is it's still very unclear as to who's getting it and how you get it. Mm-hmm. So if you're with one of the big healthcare systems, like Ascension or Aurora, they have the vaccine, so you're able to call your doctor and say, okay, I need to get a vaccine. The problem is that they're going to put you on a list and you probably don't have any idea how long it's going to take. Mm. So, and the government has also given the state vaccine to distribute to health centers and to the National Guard. So, for instance, in Milwaukee County, you could go to the convention center and get vaccinated. So, but those aren't working necessarily with the clinics. And so, like my mother-in-law, who's 79, had a hard time trying to figure out where to get her vaccine. She called her doctor. They put her on a list, but they had no idea how long, if it would be a month, if it's going to be a couple of weeks. She had no idea. So then we put her on a list over at the convention center, which she ended up getting sooner. But when you call the convention center, they say, oh, well, go on our website and sign up. Mm-hmm. Put your email in. She doesn't have an email address. She doesn't do those kind of things. So, expecting these elderly people to be able to go on a list or to go online, and they really can't do that.
Right.
Now Walgreens are getting some of the vaccines, and it's kind of the same thing with them. And then Walgreens also has another problem. Like everybody has the same problem, is that they don't want to give someone a first vaccination and not be able to give them the second one because they say if you get it, you're supposed to get that second one 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later. They're afraid that they're going to give that first vaccine and then 3 weeks later they don't have it for that second one. So that makes
them hold back a little bit, I guess.
Right, exactly. It makes them hold back, and so that's been another thing that's kind of gunked up the machinery. So there's a whole lot of, and then also the other issue too is that, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. African Americans and Black and brown people are more likely to have complications from COVID. Okay, we're twice as likely to end up in a hospital if you get COVID than white people. That being said, a lot of people think that, if we're more likely to have complications, there should be some kind of emphasis that says some priority to say that we should be able to get that vaccine.
Right.
And just the opposite has been going on. When they look at the initial data, it looked like Black and brown people were less likely to get the vaccine. And some of that probably at this point is just of access. We got two issues. We got hesitancy, the people who are able to get the vaccine but don't want to get it for whatever reason. And then you got the other issue of access. So at this point, I don't think there's too much issues yet where people can get the vaccine but don't want it. I think right now it's more of an access issue. the demand is higher than than the
What's
supply
available.
at this time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But at some point that we're going to cross that line, and it's going to be an issue now. Okay, we have the vaccine, go out and get it, but people don't trust it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a whole other thing. I remember early on, in fact, I was looking back at one of your old shows with Pat McManus. And at that time, that was way back in, it seems so long ago. That was like May or March. Yeah. And at that time, we were talking about, I think there were less than there were 7 cases, I think, in the state. And at that time, there was this thought that, Black people can't get
That's
COVID.
right. I remember that.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And we know where that ended up, And so,
things certainly changed. Yep.
Yeah. So
Good
much has
thinking.
changed.
Yeah.
But I really want to, if I can encourage people, given all that we've talked about, I still think that the benefits of getting vaccinated outweigh the risks. And the benefits being that, even if there will be some side effects, there will be some side effects. As we go along, we're going to find that out. But as especially with us African Americans, we're more likely to have those complications from the actual infection. So you have to ask yourself, am I more likely to have complications from getting the actual infection, or am I more likely to have complications from the vaccine? And I think most people are going to say that getting the infection, because we still, again, the virus is still new. We don't know 10 years from now or a year from now, what are some of the consequences of having the infection. We're starting to see people have heart problems, people having lung, breathing problems. So there are some still unknown consequences of having the natural infection too.
Dr. Izard, you are a wealth of information. Thank you so much. We blew through that 30 minutes
we sure did, didn't we?
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your time with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
It was good. Very informative, and I really, really appreciate that. Dr. Kevin Izard is the president of Cream City Medical Society of Milwaukee. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, so thank you.
Yeah, and please, if I can do anything more for you, or if anyone has questions out there, some of the good resources, the Milwaukee County has a dashboard. You just go online and do Milwaukee County COVID dashboard. It'll show you the number of cases and where things are popping up. The state also has a dashboard that'll tell you about updates on the COVID vaccine and where it's going and who's getting it. So follow the data. It's out there.
Perfect. Thanks again. And thank you for joining us for another episode of the 411 Live, Real People, Real Talk. We are a nonprofit organization, so if you're so inclined to become a member or sponsor, go to our website, the411live.org. Until next time, I'm Beverly Taylor, and this is the 411 Live, Real People, Real Talk. If you would like to check out past episodes, there are many ways. Go to your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Like and watch us on Facebook. Watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have suggestions for future episodes, go to our website, the411live.org.